Hi, and welcome to Homeside Chats. This is Andrea French, Executive Director for TAG, Transportation Advocacy Group for the Houston region. Today's episode, I'm joined by Harris County Commissioner Adrian Garcia. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you for having me, Andrea.
So I see that you are at work and busy as all of our leaders are currently trying to navigate the daily life. So can you share a little bit about what your days look like and what they've kind of transformed into throughout this pandemic?
Well, I tell you that this pandemic has been obviously an experience for us all. And here in the county and the Precinct 2 office in particular, it's been no different than what anybody else and even what citizens at home are having to contend with. We've had to figure out how to carry on our operations, but in a much safer and healthier way. We've had to think about how to engage our citizens in a safer, healthier way. We continuously had the motto that even though our buildings may be closed, our services and our hearts are not. And so we have worked very, very aggressively to make sure that no citizen felt like everything has stopped and that their needs and issues were being unaddressed. So we were not going to leave anyone behind. So I'm very grateful to my staff for all of the phenomenal work that they've done. Just a quick side note, Andrea, and that is that we have been dispensing about 3 tons of food on a weekly basis during this pandemic, making sure that seniors who are homebound are receiving nutritious meals, making sure that children who have depended on the school districts to provide their daily meals were getting something nutritious. And then obviously individuals who have been economically affected by the pandemic, who are now struggling to put meals on the table for their families, that they too have resources available to them. And then obviously the testing, making sure that any citizen who is concerned about their health gets the right support to be tested. And so we have been working very closely with the Public Health Department to move forward testing throughout the precinct and obviously throughout the county. So very, very different days. And then obviously the world of government continues. Right. We just had our county clerk offer her resignation for health reasons. So we have to work to find that replacement. Potholes still find their way to happen. We have to fix those potholes. Parks still have grass growing. We have to cut that grass. So the work continues. And I'm proud to say that the Precinct 2 office has not missed a step during this pandemic in serving our citizens.
Well, we certainly appreciate all of your service and your leadership, and especially, as we personally work through the day, our days, your comment about how many people are still hungry, and that service piece, doesn't change even as we have these conversations about, kind of the reopening discussion. One of the things that TAG is doing is the mayor is going to give his State of Mobility address at the end of the month, virtually, of course, and we're donating for every registration, we're donating a meal to Meals on Wheels, and then we've also asked for folks to submit thank you videos for our frontline workers, and those videos represent a meal to Kids Meals Inc. So because it really is our kids and our seniors that are probably at the highest rate of suffering from hunger right now. So we appreciate all of the service that all of the leaders have really taken on in each of their corners and pockets, of the county and the region. So
I'll just say real quickly that TAG has always had a special place in my heart because of all that you do to get us to think about multimodal forms of transportation. But with that, you've moved up a few notches.
Well, we appreciate that. Well, we think it's about, it's about the industry, and we talk about what transportation means and access, right? Which right now, certainly that's been a big piece of what we're learning through the pandemic is access to different places. And, we talked with Judge Hidalgo, and she mentioned that access was huge for people that couldn't get to the testing sites, and ability really, I think what we've learned through the pandemic is that we're all we're also much more connected than we realized. Issues are much more connected than we realized. It's exposed quite, quite a bit. So in talking about transportation and mobility, can you share, from the county view, what has the county observed and learned about mobility and transportation through all of the challenges that we've been facing recently?
I'll just say that what we've learned, it's really pre-pandemic, and that is that effective mobility is one of the most important issues for our economy. If you can't get your workforce to the job, that's problematic. If you can't get freight from the port and into the stores, that's problematic. And when you have people stuck in gridlock for 2 hours, 3 hours over the year, that is problematic to their quality of life. So obviously, we've learned a great deal pre-pandemic. But during the pandemic, we realized that, we have a lot of good citizens that have learned to heed the advice of our medical professionals. And that has given us the opportunity to accelerate a lot of projects so that we can make sure to enhance our mobility systems and without having to navigate oncoming traffic and things of that nature. But it also has made us aware that the things that we have taken for granted. For example, I worked tirelessly for a year to be able to launch our transit rides system in Precinct 2, because Precinct 2 is almost entirely outside of the metro service area. And now with the pandemic, we had to think about how to leverage those resources, but in a healthier way. So we had never talked to our operators about sanitation. Although they kept the buses clean, sanitation was a whole other conversation. And so making sure that those systems are still maintain the confidence of the users is very, very, very critical. But also, it also reminds us that, as you were alluding to during the testing, that there's a lot of people who need to have the testing resources in their backyards because it's literally the only way they can get to it. And so thinking about hike and bike trails, making sure that there's good sidewalk system available in the community. All those things are issues that my office has been focused on, and it's issues that we're having, I think, a good conversation across the county about.
Well, that's great. And I think too, one of the things I've had conversations about with people is a concern about the transit piece moving forward, because transit by its nature and by its definition is moving a larger amount of people together at one time. And we have seen Metro with a phenomenal response. They have marshaled their additional buses. They have been so transparent and so communicative with the public. But it occurred to me also that as we walk through this pandemic and as people are suffering so much financially, that transit is going to continue to be even more so relied upon. People will not be able to afford cars. They will not be able to afford all of the expenses that come with having their own personal vehicle. I think even more so than we see now. And so while transit will still be, need to have the social distancing and will need to put in those protections, the need is going to actually grow. And I think the want is going to actually grow because there will be many more people that will look to that option from a financial perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're hitting it right on the head. And in the a couple of things. One is that just this morning I was listening to my morning music as I was getting ready for work, and a paid advertisement came across my Pandora station, and it was a title loan company. Okay. And so to me, that is concerning, because obviously everybody in business is in it for the business.
Right.
But my worry is that a lot of people will hear an advertisement like this, go take their titles, get a cash infusion that they need, to move forward, but ultimately lose that vehicle because they may not be able to repay the loan,
Right.
which makes your point much more important. But then on the other front, there are families, I believe, that are recognizing the fact that, you know what, I need to save somewhere. Where can I save?
Right.
I can save on gas. Even though it's becoming much more affordable than it's been in recent times, people are still making critical decisions and recognizing that, you know what, I can still get around for a fraction of the cost than I was driving my own car, paying for parking, paying
Right.
for gas, and then risking, a flat tire or something of that nature. So I think a lot of families are going to be making some very, very important transit decisions based on economics of today.
Right, right. And for those that, are still going to choose and be able to kind of have the personal vehicles and utilize some of our what are still our largest kind of assets, right, for the county, our roads, our infrastructure that'll still need to be maintained, and the tolling facilities. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about I don't want to use the word, I would say reimagine. I think that was the Metro, the Metro lingo, but looking at Harris County and its transportation network, can you share a little bit about those conversations were already starting before this. Can you share how maybe this has shaped those conversations looking forward, kind of a focus on how we spend and how we allocate transportation funding at the county level?
Yeah.
How you think this might impact that?
No, I think this is a very important conversation to have, because the reality of it is that in past years, we've only looked at the toll system as essentially that, a system to collect tolls. And it was very singular focus on what revenue could be brought in from it would be invested strictly into the system itself.
Right.
But now we're having a conversation as to what is it that we need to do to continue to support the toll authority, the toll system,
Right.
but by the same token, use that revenue to create a more comprehensive, and I think reimagining how we utilize a tolling system and coexist with the tolling system in our community is appropriate. As to how we use those resources to invest into the multimodal forms of transportation so that we can enhance mobility, improve the quality of life, support our economy, and just create a entirely new way of how we get around and how we do business, and how we improve specifically the quality of life of our various neighborhoods. So it is maybe we haven't coined that term with this conversation, but I think reimagining the tolling system that we have, but more from the perspective of what is the role of the tolling system in the broader community. It has always been singularly focused, but now we need to make sure that it also has connection to all other aspects of Harris County life.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And I think you mentioned the ability to accelerate certain projects. Is that also, I think there's some tolling ones that are in the pipeline. Does that include those as well moving forward, or do you think that?
Yes, and it's actually made a lot of the work much easier. We are building the Beltway 8 bridge over the ship channel in my precinct. We're doing improving the connectors on the Hardy toll system. We're having conversations about, and this is one aspect that I'm really excited about. We're having conversations with Metro about how to leverage whatever improvements we may be doing on 45, but also how to get to that place that we've always wanted to get, and that is to connect our airport systems to the economic sectors within Houston proper. That's also going to impact my precinct as well. So we're we're looking at all of these, or right now the environment rather is allowing us to move a little faster in terms of some of the construction work, but also I think it's allowing us to really accelerate some of the studying to move those projects along, because those are the kind of projects that I got elected to work on. Those are the things that is going to move our community forward. It's going to continue to make Harris County relevant in the global economy. It's going to continue to make Harris County the place that people want to move to work, live, and raise a family. So these are very, very important times, although a pandemic, but you always got to look for that silver lining. And I think the silver lining has been that it's given us a little bit more space to move some projects along where we used to have to stop them maybe incrementally just to, because of traffic.
Right. No, and I think, kind of speaking for the infrastructure industry, one of the things I've said continuously is that, it has kept us moving, right? So we talked about the port movement, freight, shipment of goods, medicine, medicinal supplies, and still things that we want to work on, but it certainly has kept us moving. And if you look back historically, when we faced nothing like this, obviously, but other major financial, crisis, it's really been infrastructure investment that's helped be the quick job generator as well, and kind of getting our economy back on our feet as much as possible. And one of the cases that we're making to the federal government is, asking for some backfill and some to kind of help with the state DOTs around the nation that are suffering right now because, loss of revenue due to decrease in oil and gas severance taxes, vehicle car sales, right? Those are the things that traditionally would fund the larger pieces of our transportation system. And so we're asking for that additional funding right now. And then also, there's several asks right now. But the idea is that to come to the Houston region, because we will have the capability to put people to work very quickly and get back on our feet. And so that's really the ask that we're making right now. So all of your comments are really absolutely on point. We appreciate that.
And I'll just add this, that back to the phrase of imagining or reimagining, one of the things that I have been talking to almost anyone that walks into my office, engineering firms, architectural firms, transit engineering firms, any one of them that come into my office, I have been talking to them about reimagining the Port of Houston. Because as we have that conversation of deepening and widening the port, I want to be very, very careful that we're not having, again, another singular conversation. Right. Because I think we should be working rather two parallel tracks. One is deepening and widening the port, but the other one is when that happens, and it will happen, how do, we're going to have the mega tankers come into our port, which means much more freight than we're getting today.
Right.
And if the freight traffic that we have today is already struggling because of gridlock on our freeways, then let's start to have that conversation today so that we can, for once, get ahead of the 8 ball before we struggle with it and lose important revenue and economic improvements in our region. So I've been having a conversation about working to ignite a new vision for what the Port of Houston should look like, given the fact that we will be bringing mega tankers into our port, which is a good thing. But I do not want to have companies saying, you know what, it's good that they deepen and widen, but we wait there for hours or days trying to get our freight off our vessels, and that's not good. So let's go to Corpus Christi or New Orleans or San Diego, God forbid, that they make those kinds of decisions. So look, I know a lot of people in those areas, they're friends, but when it comes to our economy, I'm a competitor.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And also, when we think about our roads, right, it's a parallel conversation. One is commuter and user individual use of the roads, right? But the reality is that our roads are absolutely the asset for the transport of our goods and our freight, and that is a massive percentage, more so than many other regions that Houston faces. And so when we talk about that multimodal investment, you know, a lot of people want to have that either or conversation, and it's really not that, because we have so much that we have to handle on a daily basis in Houston. And so I appreciate that, because it really is the network of roads around the port that will help sustain and really elevate all that investment into that deepening and widening.
Yep.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
And I'll just add one more point to the conversation, and that is that a lot of people don't realize that Jeff Bezos is a hometown product. He and I actually went to the same elementary school, although a couple of classes apart. Jeff, if you're watching, you know, remember me. But if you recall, Jeff had the opportunity to invest billions of dollars on a super distribution center. He looked at the Houston area, but he chose to go somewhere else. Part of his comment or reasoning for why he didn't invest in Houston was because we had not at that time made a serious commitment to our transit system.
right.
But it also has a parallel element, and that is that the transit system we do have floods when we have natural disasters here. So the port, in conjunction with whether it be a coastal spine, a bay park, those levees, you know, we have to be very broad thinking as it comes to our transit systems, our mobility process, because when we need people to evacuate out of the area, we know that they will, but they will have to otherwise swim if we don't think about all those other systems to support our transit options for people during natural disasters. But it also, you know, just strikes for me a very important chord, and that is that if Jeff Bezos, an incredibly successful individual today, got his start in Houston, Texas, made a business decision not to invest in Houston, that's concerning to me, because we cannot have those kinds of decisions being made because people see inequities in our transit systems. We have to be aggressive, committed, and visionary as we think about transportation in the Houston-Harris County area.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's a great great story, and talking about really kind of the domino effect, right? Of when we don't look here, this happens, and this, you know, it affects something else. In talking about making those best decisions and looking forward, can you share a little bit about the I-45 project, and kind of from your vantage point? We know there's been different scenarios offered. The mayor has, you know, worked with a lot of the community groups and to put forward, you know, his preference. And so obviously the judge has been very engaged, and the commissioner. So can you share from your vantage point your thoughts on the project?
Well, you know, I think the appropriate phrase here is that this isn't my first rodeo. Because as a Houston City Council member, I dealt with one of the last conversations about widening I-45. And I think that TxDOT is finally coming to realization that widening is not the only option that should be considered. And so I appreciate the mayor, the judge, the community, everyone coming together to create a dialogue that will help TxDOT recognize that if we're having conversations about supporting mass transit systems, and we're having a conversation about multimodal forms of transportation, whether they be hike and bike trails or sidewalks, light rail, and others, then we have to challenge ourselves to determine whether widening should be the first option when we come to talk about our interstates and what we do to improve them and enhance them. That being said, you know, when the vote came up at the Houston-Galveston Area Council, I was an abstention to either opposing or supporting the current plan that TxDOT had. And the reason for that was because I didn't support the original plan of just widening I-45 because I just didn't think TxDOT had done their work. But I'm not against improving the system.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure to send a clear message that I want to be at the table. I want to create a vision for what our transit system should look like. All the studies that we've seen, and I-10 is a living legacy to the fact that when you widen, more will come.
Right.
More single occupancy vehicles will come. And that is not what we should be working to achieve, but rather we should be thinking about the role and the partnership that Metro should have with TxDOT in this conversation. And that's why I'm excited about the conversations I've been having with Metro and the toll road. We're looking to leverage the existing right-of-way of the toll road so that we can create a connector to Bush Airport to downtown. And that's the way we ought to be thinking. We ought to be much more creative. We ought to be much more innovative while we recognize that we have to improve systems, but we cannot go back to the simple process of just widening and acquiring more private property as the approach that today needs. Maybe that worked for us back in the 60s, but we're in a different time and we ought to be thinking differently.
I think those are all excellent points, and TAG has offered that kind of a similar conversations, right? That they're just as a dialogue that needs to happen. That's what's best for for everybody involved. And so a lot of it is just information that people want to better understand in many cases. And so we appreciate the leadership that you've provided in those conversations. So I want to go back to the conversations, kind of talking about the response, and kind of wrap up and talk about, we've talked a lot about transportation, which really does connect to a lot of different things, but we can't not look at the fact that the county budget is going to be very, very impacted by everything. And so can you share kind of in your mind, what are some of the tough calls that we're going to have to look at the county budget looking forward? Obviously it's not just transportation that the county is responsible for, major health issues, obviously, that are going to come out of this, and funding and needs. And so can you provide kind of a snapshot of that for us?
Sure. And let me just begin with this, Andrea, and that is that when I do my work at the Commissioner's Court table, it begins with the lens of what Precinct 2 is up against. Precinct 2 has amongst the lowest median income of all Harris County. Precinct 2 has amongst the lowest homeownership rate of all of Harris County. Precinct 2 has amongst the highest number of children and families without health insurance. Precinct 2 has amongst the lowest educational attainment rate at the high school and post-high school level. And Precinct 2 has amongst the highest rates of diagnosed cancer and respiratory issues of all of Harris County. So as I do my work at Commissioner's Court, it is with those details in mind. And so it is why, as we are talking about opening, reopening, and the recovery to the pandemic, we're still in the conversation of recovery from Hurricane Harvey.
Absolutely.
And so we had to, I think we had a very, very meaningful and important conversation about resiliency. And it wasn't simply about building brick and mortar systems that are needed and very, very appropriately needed. But it was also making sure that we look at recovery in a broader context of whether we should be thinking about transit as a part of recovery to Hurricane Harvey, which is how the transit ride system came to be in my precinct. Because as I mentioned, Metro almost serves no aspect of Precinct 2, but it was Hurricane Harvey recovery that allowed me to put the transit system, the Harris Transit System, in place, because during Hurricane Harvey, Precinct 2 also had an inordinate number of vehicles that flooded.
Right.
And so we had to think about how to provide that support system. So as we look at this pandemic and what is recovery, and think about what is the role of Harris County, I just want to make sure to remind folks a couple of things that have already happened. One is that I suspended the tolls on the Harris County toll road system because I didn't want people who needed to, who may be first responders and needed to get somewhere and may be choosing not to use the toll system simply because we were charging. So we suspended that for about 30 days.
Right.
And then I also put in place a $10 million small business loan package so that we can help our small businesses in Harris County recover, keep their doors open so that people can stay on the payroll and we can flatten the unemployment curve. And now we're looking at providing rental assistance again for those that have been impacted by this. But I'll also be thinking about our property owners and doing what we can to support our most vulnerable. They were the target of this vicious virus, and so we ought to be thinking about how to support them as well. So I'll be proposing an item at Commissioner's Court to be in support of them. But in all of that, this will be taking a somewhat of a revenue stream from our county coffers.
Right.
But having been through Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, and Ike, and as I said, this is not my first rodeo, I believe that if we are supporting the local economy, if we are being aggressive on testing to make sure that anyone who's affected ought to have access to a test, and if we're making sure that we're supporting our small businesses and people are remaining employed and having their insurance stay intact, that we'll be able to get through this. And although I don't believe government should be in the business of being a business and in other words, trying to draw a profit. I think our role is to find all opportunities to create resiliency, stability, predictability, and confidence. And so that is the work that we are all doing right now for this pandemic and moving forward. But it will take, our coffers will take a hit. But I would rather our coffers take a hit than local businesses and local families take a hit. But it would also, I will also be working in the future to ensure that we do more to think about events like this, because during the hurricane season, which is about to start officially on June the 1st, we have always said, what if a hurricane comes? Well, Hurricane Katrina, Rita, and Ike taught us that we should be saying, what if hurricanes hit? And similarly, a pandemic has occurred. We may very well have another one. We may have a reoccurring spike, and we may have to go back to the type of environment that we were previously in. So we're not out of the woods yet. And so we ought to be doing everything possible to challenge government first before we ask the community to sacrifice.
Well, thank you for that. That's such a great message. And I do want to offer you an opportunity to say thank you to perhaps the county workers that have continued to keep things moving. If you could look at the camera and say that, and we will add a meal in your name donated to Kids Meals Inc. I'll just give you a second to go ahead and do that.
Thank you. I'd love that. Thank you, first of all, to TAG for all that you're doing. And thank you for thinking about those children and those families who need nutritious meals. And to our first responders, whether it be any one of our medical professionals that are out there working to keep individuals and families healthy and safe, God bless you. God love you. We thank you. And to our traditional first responders, our law enforcement and our firefighters, our EMS, we say we love you. We thank you because you can't shelter in place. You can't social distance. You've got to run to everything that everybody else is running from. And as a result, we recognize the sacrifices that you're making. And we know that you are why we are being as safe as we are today. So we love you. Thank you. Precinct 2 loves you.
Thank you, Commissioner. That was great. And thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to your team as well for being so helpful with getting this together, this conversation together. We appreciate you and your leadership and service, and we look forward to many more conversations as we kind of all work together to navigate and come out of this shining better and brighter.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everybody. Jordan. Thank you, Milton and Tanya, and look forward to being any help in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner. That was Homeside Chats. We hope you enjoyed our program today. This series would not be possible without the support and partnership of our 2020 Mobility Partners. We thank you for your support during these challenging times. Stay tuned for more episodes of Homeside Chats.